Halloween night was always a special occasion in our small town. The air was crisp, and the leaves had turned brilliant shades of orange and red. It was the kind of evening that seemed to carry magic in its very essence. As a child, I had eagerly anticipated the annual trick-or-treat adventure, but this Halloween was different. This Halloween, something ominous was in the air, something that sent shivers down my spine. My name is Sarah, and I was 12 years old at the time. I had spent weeks crafting the perfect costume, a witch's outfit complete with a crooked hat and a cauldron full of candy. My best friend Lily and I had planned to meet up at dusk and embark on our spooky quest for sweets. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the streets came alive with the laughter of children and the rustling of leaves. I stepped out of my house, my witch's broomstick in hand, and made my way to our meeting point. Lily lived just a few houses down, so it didn't take long for me to reach her front porch. When I arrived, I couldn't help but notice that Lily looked more anxious than excited. Her costume was that of a ghost, with a sheet draped over her tiny frame. She wore a ghostly mask, and her voice was muffled when she greeted me. "Hey, Sarah," she said, her tone uncharacteristically quiet. "What's wrong, Lily?" I asked, concerned. I had a bad feeling about tonight," she admitted. "But I didn't want to let you down. You know how much I love Halloween." I reassured her that it was just her imagination playing tricks on her, and that we were going to have a fantastic time. With a reluctant smile, she agreed, and we set off into the neighborhood. The streets were adorned with carved pumpkins, flickering candles, and eerie decorations. As we went from house to house, our bags grew heavier with candy. We encountered other children in costumes, and the atmosphere was festive and fun. But as the night wore on, a sense of unease crept over me. It was when we reached the outskirts of town, where the houses grew more spread out, that things took a strange turn. We approached a house that stood alone, its porch light the only beacon of hope in the darkness. It was a ramshackle old place with peeling paint and overgrown bushes. Lily hesitated, clutching her candy bag tightly. "Sarah, I don't want to go up there. It gives me the creeps." I understood her unease, but I didn't want to let fear dictate our Halloween night. I grabbed her hand and said, "Come on, Lily, it's just another house. We can't let it ruin our fun." With a deep breath, she reluctantly followed me up the creaky porch steps. I rang the doorbell, and we waited in awkward silence. Minutes passed, but no one answered. I was about to suggest moving on when the door suddenly swung open. A man stood in the doorway, his face obscured by a hooded cloak. He was tall and thin, and I couldn't see his eyes beneath the shadow of the hood. He held out a tray of candy, but there was something unsettling about his demeanor. "Trick or treat," I said, my voice trembling slightly. The man didn't speak. Instead, he held out the tray, and I reached for a piece of candy. But when my fingers touched the treat, a chill ran down my spine. The candy was icy cold, and as I pulled it from the tray, it left behind a sticky residue on my hand. Lily must have felt the same unease, for she tugged on my arm and whispered, "Let's go, Sarah. Something's not right here." I nodded and backed away from the strange man, clutching the cold candy in my hand. As we turned to leave, I stole a glance at the house's windows. They were dark, but I could have sworn I saw movement behind the curtains. We hurried away from the eerie house, but the feeling of dread lingered. It was as though a shadow had fallen over our Halloween night. We continued our trick-or-treating, but every house we visited seemed to be cast in a sinister light. As the night wore on, we noticed that the streets were growing emptier. The other children had disappeared, and we were the only ones left wandering the dimly lit roads. The air had grown colder, and the once festive decorations now seemed twisted and grotesque. We came to a street we didn't recognize, and the houses here were different. They were old, dilapidated, and covered in ivy. One house in particular caught our attention. It was a massive mansion, looming in the darkness like a haunted castle. "Sarah, I really think we should turn back," Lily pleaded, her voice trembling. But curiosity got the better of me, and I couldn't resist the allure of the mansion. I convinced Lily to accompany me, and we approached the imposing front door. The house was silent, and there were no signs of life inside. I reached out to knock on the door, but before my knuckles could make contact, it swung open on its own. The darkness within was impenetrable, and I couldn't see anything beyond the threshold. Lily grabbed my arm, her fingers trembling. "Sarah, this is a bad idea. Let's go." I knew she was right, but I couldn't resist the urge to explore further. I took a hesitant step into the mansion, and Lily reluctantly followed. The air inside was stale, and a musty odor filled our nostrils. We moved cautiously through the dimly lit corridors, the silence broken only by the sound of our own footsteps. The mansion seemed endless, with room after room, each more eerie than the last. As we ventured deeper, we began to notice strange, unsettling decorations, paintings of grotesque creatures, twisted sculptures, and eerie tapestries. I could feel Lily's fear growing with each passing moment, and I knew we needed to find a way out. But the mansion seemed determined to trap us, its endless hallways twisting and turning, leading us deeper into its labyrinthine depths. Just as panic began to set in, we stumbled upon a grand ballroom. The room was enormous, with a chandelier that hung from the ceiling like a giant spider. The walls were adorned with portraits of people whose eyes seemed to follow our every move. In the center of the room, there was a grand piano, its keys covered in a layer of dust. Without thinking, I approached the piano and pressed a key. The sound that emerged was haunting, a melancholic melody that echoed through the empty mansion. As the last note faded, the atmosphere in the room changed. The temperature dropped, and a soft, eerie whispering filled the air. I turned to Lily, my heart pounding in my chest, and saw fear in her eyes. "We need to leave. Now," she said, her voice quivering. We turned to make our escape, but the exit was gone. The doorway we had entered through had vanished, replaced by a solid wall. Panic set in as we frantically searched for an escape route, but the mansion seemed to have us trapped. That's when we heard it. A soft, sinister laughter that seemed to come from all directions. The portraits on the walls seemed to come to life, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The whispering grew louder, the words indecipherable but filled with malevolence. Lily and I clung to each other, the cold sweat of fear dripping down our faces. The grand ballroom began to warp and shift, its walls closing in on us. It was as though the mansion itself was alive, feeding off our fear. In a final act of desperation, we ran towards the piano and pressed random keys. The haunting melody filled the air once more, and with a sudden jolt, the walls of the ballroom began to recede. The doorway reappeared, and we sprinted towards it, the laughter and whispers echoing behind us. We burst out of the mansion, gasping for breath. The night air was cool, and the streets were empty once more. The mansion loomed behind us, its windows glowing with an otherworldly light. As we stumbled away, we looked back one last time, and I could have sworn I saw a figure in the mansion's upper window, watching us with cold, malevolent eyes. We didn't stop running until we reached the safety of our own neighborhood. The familiar houses and comforting glow of porch lights brought a sense of relief, but the memory of the haunted mansion lingered. Lily and I never spoke about that night, but the unspoken understanding between us was that we had experienced something beyond the realm of the ordinary. As the years passed, Halloween night in our town returned to its festive and joyful atmosphere. The mansion on the outskirts remained, but it was as if it had never existed. Lily and I grew older, but the memory of that haunted Halloween night never faded. To this day, I can't pass by the outskirts of town without a shiver running down my spine. The mansion might be hidden from view, but I know it's still there, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to wander into its dark corridors. And on Halloween night, when the air is crisp and the leaves rustle in the wind, I can't help but wonder if the mansion comes alive once more, its sinister laughter echoing through the empty halls.